The Stranger Things saga is coming to an end. Before you jump into that final season, here's a primer to remember how we, and the kids from Hawkins, got here. This video is a quick recap and stuffed with spoilers. If you're new to the series, this is not the place to start. Along with the Netflix series, I'm also going to give you details on the incredible Broadway prequel, The First Shadow. Season 1, The Vanishing of Will Byers. Hawkins, Indiana, 1983. Will Byers goes missing while riding his bike home from a night spent with his best friends, Mike, Dustin, and Lucas. Mike fills the role of the leader of their group. They call it their party since they relate everything back to D&D at this time in their lives. Dustin is the logical and optimistic one while providing some solid comic relief. Lucas is the most skeptical and also the closest thing to a realist that the group of young friends has. The kids are different and butt heads at times, but they're ultimately inseparable. While looking for Will, the party finds a girl in the woods. She has a shaved head and the number 11 is tattooed on her arm. She's the subject of telekinetic experiments from a nearby government lab. Mike falls for her instantly. Dustin sees her as a miracle given that she's basically a superhero in their eyes. Lucas sees danger and doesn't trust the coincidence that brought them all together the same time Will goes missing. The kids and the series go on an adventure of wonder, fear, trust, growing up, and battling the unknown. While the kids are tackling the impossible events, Joyce Byers, Will's mother, is also battling reality. She clings to hope that a disturbing phone call and flickering lights are her son communicating with her from somewhere nearby. Broken-down police chief Jim Hopper is numbed by the premature death of his own daughter. He starts to believe Joyce's story and wants to do right by saving her kid when he was powerless to save his own. A third story thread runs parallel to the other two. Mike's older sister, Nancy, is dealing with guilt associated with her growing up. She has a crush on the school's heartthrob, Steve, and turns her back on her childhood friend, Barb, who goes missing herself. Nancy teams up with Will's older brother, Jonathan, who the other high schoolers see as a freak. He's awkward and quiet, but fiercely protective of his sensitive little brother. The stories all begin to overlap as the alternate dimension, the Upside Down, creeps into their lives more. The government lab is explored revealing experiments on a kid called Henry Creel, but everything is kept just out of reach for our unlikely heroes. The big bad of the first season, aside from Dr. Martin Brenner, who runs the experiments on kids, is a monster the kids call a Demogorgon. This monster is formidable, but the larger implications of what the Upside Down contains is much scarier. In the first season finale, all of our characters converge and have to lean on each other to get through. The kids confront danger directly, the teens set traps and try to lure the creature, and the adults try to get more information from the lab. 11 sacrifices herself to kill the Demogorgon and save her newfound friends. Will returns, and when it seems like his family can put the trauma behind him, there's a stinger with him coughing up a slug-like creature brought in from the Upside Down, indicating that things are far from over. Season 2. Ghosts, guilt, and a bigger threat. A year later, the Upside Down makes waves again, and the characters have to come together in a way that they haven't in a while. Being a small town, most of the characters are bound by location, and now their shared trauma, but things kick up in the second season. Will is back, but he's haunted by what happened, literally. He has connections to the other world that are more than just unpleasant memories. Joyce fights harder to keep control of her son. Hopper steps up as something of a surrogate father to Will, and he's been doing exactly that for 11, but in secret. He tries to be her parent, but she wants to see her friends. They both have to learn to coexist with other people. 11 spent her whole life being raised as a weapon and manipulated into doing horrible things by a cold, uncaring man. She struggles with her loneliness, anger, and lack of identity. The party adds a new member in Mad Max Mayfield, a new girl in town who impresses them with her exceptional video game skills. She's defensive and angry since she lives with an abusive stepfather and a hard-ass stepbrother, Billy, who watches her like a hawk. Billy's part in the story becomes much larger since the new big bad, the Mind Flayer, will eventually use Billy's rage as fuel to get him to do its bidding. Lucas falls for Max, just like Mike fell for Elle in the first season. Nancy feels guilty about her friend Barb being taken out in the Upside Down and killed. She and Jonathan continue to battle the government lab in any way that they can, trying to expose it to the wider world. The heartthrob Steve from the first season turns out to be a pretty decent guy who helps the heroes a lot. His role evolves from love interest for Nancy to unlikely babysitter for the party. He and Dustin form a unique friendship. Elle gets frustrated with Hopper, who is trying his best but isn't always the most patient father figure. She runs off. Now, this side story received a lot of flack from the fanbase as a whole, and I don't love the diversion away from the wider group of characters that we've all bonded with, but in hindsight, This offshoot does provide a lot of Stranger Things lore, and is a great growing up experience for Elle. It's always interesting to show a fork in the road for a character that gives us, the audience, a chance to see what might have been. Elle goes in search of her past and finds a girl called Callie, or 8 as the lab designated her. Callie also has psychic powers, but they manifest themselves differently than Elle's. Callie also has a group of friends, but they live more on the fringes of society in a much rougher way than the seemingly picturesque suburbs of Hawkins, Indiana. When Elle returns to her friends and new family, it's not as a weapon but as a person choosing to fight for those that she loves rather than being manipulated into it by the guy that keeps her locked up as a test subject. As I mentioned a bit ago, this season's big bad is the Mind Flayer, a much bigger and smarter monster. It's using Will as a vessel. Through the course of the season, the party fractures and reforms through fear, loyalty, and above all else, friendship. The stakes are drastically raised, turning to the Mind Flayer, and the Demogorgon is more of an enforcer, like a dog off its leash. The Mind Flayer's goal is to possess the minds of all humans into becoming a hive mind that will consume everything. Season 3, Neon Lights and a Cold War Breach. Summer arrives in Hawkins, and the kids are psyched for the distraction. It's been a while since their last battle with the Upside Down, and new challenges face them, like puberty and relationships. This season goes hard on something unique to the 80s in the bright neon signs of the indoor shopping mall. Beneath this palace of consumerism, the Russians are drilling through our reality, looking for a way into the Upside Down. Mike and Eleven are dating. They struggle with boundaries, and Hopper is furious at being unable to stop the hormones or snarky remarks. Joyce becomes the voice of reason in child-rearing, but also is the first to see the signs of a new conspiracy that she's sure means more. This will, of course, lead them to the Russians. Dustin returns from time away at a computer summer camp and is disappointed that most of his friends are too busy to give him the welcome that he feels he deserves. Everyone except Steve, of course. Steve is realizing that being the coolest guy in high school doesn't exactly translate to the real world. He's working a dead-end job in the mall with a newcomer, Robin Buckley. Dustin brings back stories of his girlfriend, Susie, who seems too good to be true and no one believes, until they're confronted with her forcing Dustin to sing a duet of the never-ending story theme. The show is so great at balancing world-ending stakes with heart and humor. The Steve, Robin, and Dustin story also brings in Lucas's younger sister, Erica, as a smart-mouth foil to Dustin. They uncover the secret code of the Russian lab. Nancy and Jonathan are still working together to chase a story that most dismiss in a classic horror franchise trope. Max and Eleven form a tight friendship and look for identity independent of the boys. Mike makes a mess out of his relationship with Elle after Hopper threatens him, and Lucas is always making a mess of things with his romantic relationship with Max. This is a continuation of Elle's journey with 8, but it's truer to who Elle really is, Jane. That's her given name, the name given to her by her mother, not the one that the lab stuck her with. Max's older brother, Billy, becomes a pawn of the powerful Mind Flayer, who is back and more prominent this year than it was in Season 2. Billy recruits more people as drones of the monster, which leads to a spectacular and very 80s showdown in the Starcourt Mall food court. Billy gets some redemption as he dies saving Eleven. Hopper sacrifices himself, at least it seems until a stinger in the closing credits, shutting down the Russians' machine, and Elle sacrifices her powers in taking on the Mind Flayer to save her friends. This season has one of the largest emotional hits as a letter of the presumed dead Hopper to Elle is read over in his voice. The Byers have had enough and packed their things to move to California, splitting the party and really hitting home for anyone who lost a childhood friend to distance. Season 4, trauma takes shape and fear finds a name. At the end of the last season, our characters are wrecked emotionally. This season will see a fracture made literal in Hawkins. Max grieves the death of Billy. It's a confusing time for her as Billy was never good to her, but he was family and did do the right thing in the end. It's made even more tragic when we dive into Billy's backstory in Season 3, where he fits the old adage, hurt people hurt people. Lucas doesn't want to be called a nerd and made fun of his whole high school career, so he puts some distance from the D&D side of himself and joins the basketball team. Dustin and Mike join the Hellfire D&D Club, led by teenage flunky Eddie Munson. The season then uses and gently mocks the satanic panic that actually happened in our country at the time. Will continues to be tragic as the Upside Down first took him, and now he has to battle with his own identity, and it's more prevalent as he ages. He's stuck in a type of arrested development, not able to navigate love, loyalty, and friendship. He thinks he has to keep silent. The Will arc is handled really well. It never feels like too much is put into one character, and it also feels that everything that character is going through does not negatively rub up against the rest of the series. This season, above all the others, breaks our hearts on watching these kids grow up and in some ways grow apart. Hopper survived the explosion and is being held in a Russian gulag, attempting to work with a disenfranchised guard to get him out. Joyce is forced to team up with a local conspiracy theorist, Murray, when she receives a bizarre letter that she is sure is from Hopper. The new big bad of the season emerges, and it turns out was the big bad of everything before the series even started. More on that in a couple minutes. Vecna is hunting down people in the real world, targeting trauma, feeding on people's negative emotions and self-doubt. This puts Max right in the crosshairs. Nancy keeps investigating. Robin brings logic and empathy to the group. Jonathan dives headfirst into danger because of different kinds of love for his brother and Nancy. The revelation of Vecna and who he is reshapes the whole series, but not retroactively. All of the pieces from the very start are shown in full light and clearer shape. 11 did not unleash evil from the Upside Down. She actually had a hand in creating it from the start. Henry Creel, the boy that Hopper and Joyce first hear about in cryptic files in the first season, is thrust into the Upside Down and through his own pain, fear, and abilities was able to harness it rather than succumb to it. He spent years growing more powerful and less human, waiting to get revenge on the world that cast him out. There is more division amongst the characters in this season than all the others. The adults are primarily in Russia trying to get Hopper, the Byers, Mike, and Elle are in California trying to get back to Hawkins. The kids in Hawkins find themselves on opposite sides of a manhunt while trying to keep the all-powerful Vecna from brutally killing Max and simultaneous trying to keep a mob and the police from hunting Eddie down, who's been wrongfully accused of other nasty killings that Vecna performed. In the end, the gang is back together, but Max is left hollow. Vecna seems to have taken her mind. The Upside Down has torn literal chasms into Hawkins. Season 0, The First Shadow. Many fans have not had the chance to see the prequel play because it debuted in London and then made its way into New York City on Broadway. I went out of my way to see it, and before I dive into the details, I have to say that if you're a Stranger Things fan and going to see this play is possible at all, go and see it. The story is great, the performances are true to the characters, and the effects that they pull off in real time on a stage in front of you are sensational. Getting back to the recap. Hawkins, Indiana, 1959. Hopper, Joyce, and Bob Newby, who I actually didn't mention in the recap even though Sean Astin is a welcome addition to the cast. Anyway, all of these characters are teenagers at Hawkins High. The kids are unaware that their town is basically a ticking time bomb. The core of the story is the tale of newcomer Henry Creel. We see his family unravel, his powers bloom, and the first inclination of the monster that he'll become in some killings that are not circumstantial, but intentional choices made by a broken kid. Dr. Brenner steps in, seeing opportunity to stand near glory. We see a story of the Upside Down not creating Vecna, but Vecna creating himself and molding the Upside Down. You don't necessarily need to see the play to enjoy the series, but it adds so much more depth to the villain without ruining the menace by making him an overly sympathetic character. We understand that the whole evil alternate dimension and the monster that it contains centers around someone who was once human. Every death ties back to Henry, who becomes one in the lab before rebranding himself as Vecna. The final season of Stranger Things isn't about defeating monsters, but about defeating the evil that lives inside humanity. This is a way more powerful message. Before I wrap, I want to shut up the complainers on two things. The primary two complaints that I see are the gaps between the seasons and the fact that Will was taken but not killed when the Demogorgons killed everyone else, like Barb. Don't think of Stranger Things like a classic network TV series. We've moved past that. This is a movie cut up into episodes. It's common for movie sequels to be released a few years apart. Not to mention the fact that the kids age in real time, or at least nearly enough. It would also be more unbelievable for all of the events in the show to happen in 9-month blocks with only 3 months in between. So just let it go. Enjoy it for what it is. The next complaint is more story-driven. Will was not taken by a Demogorgon. That's why he wasn't killed right away. Vecna was the one who singled him out, marked him, and pulled him into the Upside Down. We realize this in hindsight after we learn about Vecna since he was there the whole time, and we know this is not a retcon because of the sound design and the way the Will abduction scene is set up, namely the clock sound that is associated with Henry Creel's home and Vecna. Rewatch the scene, I promise you it's been there the whole time. I'm pumped to get into this final season of Stranger Things, though I'll be sad to say goodbye to it and all of the characters. What are your thoughts on the series? Will you be watching? Let us know in the comments and get out of here. I gotta go watch Stranger Things.